So today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Julia Chapple. Hi, Julia. How are you?
Hi, Vic. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. A bit early in the morning here, but it's not for you, is it?
No, it's evening.
So my traditional first question then is what do you do?
Well, essentially, at the moment, I'm retired because I've reached an age that I can retire. I used to be a chef for many years, and I used to teach Tai Chi. But now I just look after our properties with my husband, and we truck around Australia, and I read cards, and I'm starting to practice witchcraft.
Right. Okay, that's a bit of a mix.
Yeah.
Now you've got quite an interesting story.
Yeah.
So what was the sort of chef work the thing in the early days? Was that your first thing you did?
Yeah, it was my first job because I did a lot of traveling, and I realized after a while that everyone needs to eat.
Yes.
So I thought, when you travel,
yeah,
essentially you're going to meet someone who's hungry. And so I thought, well, this should add up. But I didn't take into account how much hard work it was.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So let's take this back to the beginning then. So where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Switzerland, but my parents lived in Rome, actually on the Appian Way.
Good God, amazing! Yeah. Right, okay.
And they were both spies, and so.
Okay, let's pause there a minute. That's amazing. Okay. So were they? So what nationality were they?
My father was British, and he was an MI6 spy. And my mum was American, and she was an IOS spy.
Wow.
And they met
at the
end of.
I know that's a silly question.
But I only found out towards the end of a lot later. Because there was too many secrets. They never
absolutely
told us anything, right? Eventually it all kind of came out, but of course I only know tiny little bits because obviously they were sworn to secrecy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So that's about as far as I know, potentially. And so we lived in Rome, and my mum, and also they had the, in Rome at that time in the 50s, there was a Dolce Vita. And they were more interested in socializing and hobnobbing and all that sort of stuff. And, I think they just had a child because it was a thing to do, right? They didn't actually realize that it involved responsibility and looking after and that sort of stuff. So essentially, I spent the first 8 years of my life being looked after by the cook. So my first language was Italian. And the first school I went to was an Italian school, where I'd wear like a little white gown with a pink ribbon because I was a girl. And then my brother was born. Keep in mind, my parents were 40 when they had me. So when my brother was born, my mum was 43. And she was a bit of an alcoholic. And she also, they just weren't that responsible at all. She was told not to have another child, but she did, my brother. When he was born extremely sick. And so he ended up spending his whole babyhood in clinics in Switzerland. So at that point, my parents decided to move to Switzerland. And I was 8 years old, and I was put into a French boarding school in Switzerland, in the Bernese Oberland, in a town called Sarnen. And of course, I didn't speak a word of French, but when you're 8, you're pretty flexible. People don't realize kids are really flexible. They can bend and fold and, and adapt quite easily.
Yeah.
And so, I went to the school, and I went to a couple of schools in this village, and they were all both French, quite strict in a lot of ways. And I did all my schooling in French. So at this point, I spoke fluent French and fluent Italian. And I didn't speak English that well. So by the time that I was, and also I learned how to ski, and I loved skiing, and I was always in all the ski teams. And by the time I was about 14, my parents suddenly realized that maybe I should go to an English school. So they sent me to this weird old school just above Montreux in Switzerland, where it was like a spooky old building full of ghosts and English girls, and an English girls' school, and wasn't very nice. And I didn't really enjoy myself. By this time, school was just getting boring because it's just too much going on. And then finally, when I was 16 or 17, I managed to get them to allow me to go to day school. So I went to the International School of Geneva. Of course, this was a really bad mistake because my parents had never didn't know me at all. I went completely off track and ended up meeting all the wrong people, and just kind of, went into the wrong direction completely.
Right.
Yeah. So I managed to get through high school, and of course university wasn't in the question because I was a girl. I did have ambition. I'm an artist. I've always done my art, and that is the one thing that has always helped me to get through my loneliness in boarding school. Was my art, was to just hide in the corner and draw and doodle and just let go of my emotions in that way. But anyway, when I was in Geneva, I met all the wrong people and I got drugs, and it all ended really badly. So much so that I ended up one day I was living in Geneva, and I took some heroin and I overdosed. And I was supposed to meet my parents in this restaurant this night, and I collapsed in the middle of the Pont du Mont Blanc. And I'll never forget, I was lying on the side of the road, and this voice came into me and said, Julia, wake up, go, move, anything, just move. Right. And I'm kind of listening, like, oh, someone's telling me to move. And it's like, no, and it was myself telling myself to move. And so I managed to get myself up on the handle, on the edge of the bridge. There's like a barrier. And I kind of clutched on, and I'm slowly getting my body to move and circulating. And I managed to get to this restaurant alive. And then a couple of nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just thought, I've got to go. I have to go. I can't stay here anymore. So at that point, this was in the 70s, I thought, oh, well, everyone's going to India. I might as well go to India. At this point, I'd been put into hospital, and I was weaned off heroin, and so I was not taking heroin anymore. And I just thought, I've got to go. I just can't stay. So I informed my parents, I'm going to India. I had a job, so I had money, and I had £1,000 that I had inherited off some great aunt somewhere back in history. So I bought this return ticket to, was then Bombay, now Mumbai. And so that was the beginning of my journey. So I got on the train, and I went to Munich. And I remember the night before, because I'd been raped quite a few times in the previous years. So I suddenly got fearful. Oh, damn, I wish I was a bloke. Oh, damn, maybe I can look like a bloke. But I had long blonde hair and blue eyes. There's nothing like a bloke at all. And so I was just like, oh, well, I mean, at this point I was committed, right? So there was nothing I could do. So I got on this plane and I landed in Mumbai. And as I landed and got out and got in the bus to go to my hotel, I just saw all these people living on the side of the streets. And I'd seen poverty, but I'd never seen it to that extent. And I was like, oh, wow, where have I landed? So that was fine. I pulled into the hotel. Then I decided I had to go to Goa. So I got on this bus, and it was a public bus. And it took then, I don't know now, but in those days, it took 24 hours to get to Goa from Mumbai. And I thought, oh, there's heaps of people in this country. I'll be fine. I'll just sit right at the back of the bus. Nobody will notice, forget me altogether. And as the bus took off, every stop, no one got on. Right. And as the evening, because the bus left at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and as the bus progressed, no one got on, and it got darker and darker. And I'm kind of like slinking in my seat, thinking, oh, they've forgotten. No, maybe they've forgotten I'm here. They're just driving on. Then about midnight, they stopped at a what I realized later was a truck stop, a trucker's stop. And so they stopped. I thought, oh, shit. And one of them got up, in the Indian way. Oh, would you like to eat some food? And I went, and I thought, oh, shit, I'm kind of hungry. Yeah, okay. Because at this time, I'd never eaten with my hands. I had none of the rituals that Indians do when they eat. So I walked into this room with what was 400 men, no woman, and literally 800 eyes just went boom and were looking at me. And they virtually looked at every single move that I did, as the bus drivers were teaching me how to wash my hands, that I wasn't allowed to eat with my left hand, right hand, and because you're with your left hand, you wipe your ass.
Yeah,
blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. Yeah. So all this I had to learn real quick. And so I got through that, right? And I'd never eaten curry either, hot curry. So I was given this plate.
Yeah.
I started eating, and then next minute it was like smoke was coming out of my ears. But they bought this meal for me, so I had to eat it.
Yeah.
And I had to be polite. It was like, oh my God. So I'm trying to and they're still looking at me the whole time, right? So, and I got through this meal, got back in the bus, and eventually, as dawn broke, people started to get on the bus with their chickens, with their goats, and every other creature. And I got to Goa. So I spent a bit of time in Goa. I never made it to Paradise Beach, probably just as well, because I probably would still be there now. I got bitten by a dog on the way, and I got rabies, and I thought, oh, I didn't, but I just got, you get all paranoid and stuff.
Yeah.
A little nip, but you get all paranoid.
Yeah.
So I went back to my hotel, not hotel, it was a room I had rented, and it was it was in Anjuna Beach, and I had my 21st birthday there, and the whole household got together, and they made festivities for me, and they made these beautiful fish cakes, and it was just wonderful. Yeah. And anyway, so then, I'm trucking around India for a bit, and then I saw this ticket for Kathmandu, and I thought, Cat Stevens, Kathmandu.
Yeah.
Must be a good place, but not knowing at all anything about Nepal or Kathmandu or even where it was. So I bought this ticket, which turned out to be on the Magic Bus. And so we had a 3-week journey up to Kathmandu. And as we're getting there, like in Himalayas, you go, Himalayas, yeah. Coming from Switzerland, you can see the mountains miles away. But like literally you drive up, and then all of a sudden you just go, wow, okay, there's the mountains. Like literally like a wall right in front of you. And, it took, went to Pokhara, and we landed in Kathmandu, I don't know, it was about 10 o'clock at night. And I had, obviously it was a whole group of us. And because I speak several languages, I was always ended up being the translator.
Yeah.
And so we'd rolled a big fat joint, except for we didn't have any matches, which was problematic. So, me being all full of energy, I'll go and find some matches. I'll still do this kind of stuff today. I'll go and do that. And so I walk out the room, and there's a young lad standing there brushing his teeth. And ceilings are really low in Kathmandu. And so I go up to this lad, and I say, excuse me, have you got any matches? And he's like looked up at me and like looked up to me and went, wow, hit his head on the ceiling and looked back. I was like, only if I can come and join you. But I'm still with him 47 years later.
Ah, wow.
So, yeah, and I went, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And the last thing I promised myself was, I don't want any more boyfriends. I just forget boyfriends. It's just a pain in the neck. So I just want an adventure on my own. So I went, yeah, come along. So that time he had a cake, because he's a pastry cook. He had a cake shop in Kathmandu called Fishtail Pie Shop, just off Creek Street.
Wow.
And so, he was doing that, and I thought, oh well, I want to stay here now for a bit, and I didn't want to stay. I want to stay somewhere where there was a proper toilet. Being European and all. And so I found this person who turned out to be a nightmare called Thaddeus Rose. He was an ex-SAS, American SAS, Vietnam man. And he was, because of my languages, he took me in under sort of the pretense that he was going to open a language school and that I would help him, with teaching languages. So being 21, you go, yeah, that sounds exciting, blah, blah. And the only problem was that he was a nut job. Like, he was a complete nutcase. He took most of my traveler's checks, took my passport, and he basically, he would torture me. Like, he'd get, one day he got in the room that was supposed to be the hall where we were going to teach these said classes. And he got like a little scrubbing brush and a bucket, and he said, you have to clean every inch of this on your hands and knees. And I was like, oh shit, wow, this is kind of heavy going. So, and if I didn't do it, he kicked me, right? So I was getting quite upset at this point. So I'd run off to Trev and Baz, who were living in a hotel in town in a cake shop. And I kind of escaped there. And then another one of his tricks was he burnt a big pot of rice in one of those old aluminium, not aluminium, but those old pots, not silver, but the old-fashioned pot. He burnt it black, right? And he took a little scrubbing brush. He said, I want to see the silver in that again. At that point, I just threw it down. I said, I'm going. I can't handle this. I'm out of here. So I ran away, and I went up to Trev, and I said, please come and help me get out of this place. So when we returned, turned out that he had had a fight with his landlord, and he was in hospital in traction. Oh. So perfect opportunity, right? So I ran up
for an SAS man to, undercover guy to end up getting beaten up by somebody else.
Well, no, when Nepalese, they get the whole family in to join him. So he must, maybe had 10 people chance. Well, however good you are. And so anyway, and I did go and make sure he was in hospital, and sure enough, he was in traction. His leg was up, his arm was up, and I'm snickering on like, yes, karma's wonderful sometimes. And I got my passport.
Didn't move his leg around.
Sorry?
Shame you didn't use the pulleys to move his leg and arm around.
Well, not quite that mean. I know. I mean, it was tempting, but I thought, no. Let him go. Says karma will take care of him. And so anyway, so I got my passport back, got my stuff back. And I took a couple of other little things, that I thought, yes, I'll have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Trev put me up in this hotel, and then I helped him with the cake shop. And he had in those days he was using a Dutch oven because they didn't have ovens and things. So he was making like these amazing cakes with this Dutch oven with gas, with kerosene. You have to pump the kerosene up, to get the right heat. He'd come up with these amazing cakes and sponges, and we had them all on the little counter. And all like people like book writers and all these people, those type of people who were living in Kathmandu at the time, would love to come to his shop and eat his cakes. And so we did that for a while. And then he was heading towards Europe, right? And I was not planning to go back to Europe. And, and this is the most amazing part of the story, is that he actually decided to cancel his trip to Europe and bring me back to Australia. So he pretty much just, could have said to me, bye-bye, sunshine, I'm going that way, you go that way. But he fell in love with me, and he didn't want to let go. He wasn't going to, he said, no, I'm not letting this one go. So
did Trev come from Australia then?
Yes, he comes from Sydney. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so anyway, so we made our way. So we had to make our way to Singapore, and we were quite limited with money. So the only thing that I had was a return ticket to Geneva. So when we got to Malaysia, he actually no, when we were in Kathmandu, someone gave him a ticket from Singapore to Darwin or to Indonesia, because that's his story, but we had to forge his name on it because he said, Julia, you're the artist, you forged it. So I did. In those days, you could do that kind of thing. Nowadays,
absolutely.
And so we got ourselves to Malaysia. We flew out of Kathmandu and we landed in Bangkok, and then we took the train down to Malaysia. But when we got to the border, you had to have $100 each. And we only had $100, right? And so this Chinese guy, no, actually he was Malaysian, well, Chinese Malaysian. He saw the situation that we were in. He said, look, I'm going back over the border tomorrow. I'll take her and not give me the $100, but let me through. And then you can connect when you get to Penang. So I went, yeah, cool, that's fine, that. And so, this couple were very nice. They shouted me dinner and they gave me a room, except for that just as I was about to go to sleep, there was a knock on the door, and the Chinese man, oh, you must come, you must come. And so I had to go to his room, and then he proceeded to try and rape me. And I'm just going, nah, your wife is there. Oh, she's trained. I've trained her. It's like, no, this is not happening, right? I appreciate everything, but this is just not going to happen. So he was nice enough to let me go. And at this point, I thought, oh shit, now he's going to dump me, and I'm going to be here all on my own. But he didn't. He kept his word, and we went across the border, and I met Trev in Penang, and we stayed there for a month, and in this hotel where the guy trusted us to pay him. So we spent a month in Penang. He all the food, we ate food because it was kind of a hotel with a restaurant in it. And I sent my ticket back, and obviously couldn't, but my mum obviously sent me the money back. I said, I'm not coming back to Europe. I need the money, whatever it was, which she eventually sent to me, and we paid the hotel all the money owed. And we had fun in Penang too. It was a great, in those days, it was a wonderful place. And so then as we're heading down to Singapore, we kept bumping into these two people, one, Terry and Les. They were Australian. And Terry was a little jeweler, skinny little jeweler with a long beard, long hair. And Terry was big, fat, sort of bombacious sort of lad who'd just come out of the army. And they kept bumping into them, and they weren't the kind of people that we really wanted to associate with, not because they were mean or nasty, but they weren't our types. And and then we thought we keep bumping into them, right? So finally, getting closer and closer to Singapore, and Terry goes, look, Trev, I need you to take some jewelry back to Australia. I'll pay you a ticket to
Oh,
go from Indonesia to Darwin, right? So that was his side of the story. And with me, Les said, and Terry said to me, all right, I will meet you in Perth. My parents are traveling around Australia. They're retired. The house is empty and I'll be there. And you're more than welcome. I'll meet you there. So I went, okay, cool. That's fine, right? So we pull up at Singapore, go to I remember the name of the boat, it's Kota Kinabalu, and it was a big ship, and Australians would go from Perth to Singapore, they'd go shopping and they'd, whatever the hell they did on the boat, they danced, played, screwed, did everything, whatever, right? So, and there was about 3 or 4 of us travelers on the boat. There was a couple of English boys, 3 English boys, and Fern, an Irish girl. And the rest of them were all just, on this boat, being, a big boat. And so the very first night on the boat, and, the boat was a Russian boat. And, even, my dad, was hated Russians for all the reasons. And
it was a spy.
Yeah, and so, so we to this boat, like water was coming out of the air conditioning, and I'm kind of like, oh shit, this is a Russian boat. Maybe my dad was right, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I went, oh, well, never mind. Anyway, I'm going to bed. I went to bed, and at about 5 o'clock in the morning, the alarm went, all hands on deck, man overboard. So I was like, oh shit, and so I jump out of bed and run up to the deck, and everyone's looking, man overboard. And what had happened was that one of the English boys, well, there was 3 English boys, they were getting really, really drunk. I mean, like completely drunk. And one of them needed to go to the loo.
Mm.
And so he said, oh, I'm just going to go to the loo, I'll be back. But he was so drunk. And because it was a massive ship, they have places where they throw the rubbish out. Like it's just like an open door. It looks, and it was dark down there, right? And so he stepped straight out into the deep blue sea. This is probably about 4 hours out of Singapore, right? And so obviously when he didn't come back, the other 2 boys were kind of a bit concerned, and they got the one of the people who were working on the yacht, on the ship. So can you see it? Can you find our friend? And obviously they've got a skeleton key, so they went into all the cabins to see if he'd fallen into bed with some wonderful woman or whatever. Couldn't find him anywhere, right? So finally they went to the captain. The only hint that they had was one woman said, oh yes, at 10:10 I heard screams for help. She had a porthole open, right? And that was the only hint that they had, right? So, that was it. So they went up to the captain, because they had, they know exactly where they are on boats, and it's at 10:10 we were there, right? So in the middle of the night, they turned the ship around and there was no storm, the water was completely calm, the weather was wonderful, everything was amazing, right? They turned back, and then as soon as the sun rose, they got all hands on deck looking for this person. They must have been looking for this young lad for about, I don't know, maybe an hour or something. And they were just about to give up when he turned up. His head was bobbing in the ocean.
Really? I mean, it's so difficult to spot somebody in the middle of the ocean.
It's a miracle, right? I often
It is a miracle.
To this day, about this lad, how that affected his life. And, and he did say, he said, oh, I landed in the water and sobered up real quick and screamed for help. Yeah, and he reckoned that night he had 3 dolphins that were going around him all night.
Really?
And he said, all I could do was look for the North Star and swim north. I mean, fat chance you're going to get anywhere.
Exactly.
So anyway, he pulled him up. Off we trotted. It took, I don't know, a week to get to Perth. And I got to Perth, and I had a visa to enter Australia. But in those days, because we didn't know, but you had to have an onward ticket, which we didn't have. Oh, I can't remember if I did or I didn't. But anyway, I had a British passport. And so everyone stood in the queue, and there's this little table with this fat controller. and stamping everyone's passport, yes, next, yes, next. I turn up, right? And in with my passport, he goes, oh, yes, and my visa, yeah. And how much money have you got? So I'm like literally pulled out of my pocket. I had 60 cents to my name, right? He goes, well, that's not going to take you very far. And I went, oh, no, but I've got someone who's going to meet me here and everything will be fine. He goes, oh, look, just rolled his eyes up and went, look, just go to the side for a minute. And so, the boat's thinning out of people and I'm getting a little nervous, like, shoot, like, where's Terry? He promised me this, all this stuff. What's going to happen now? And then I was looking over the edge and then all of a sudden in the distance, I see this person running, along the quay. And then it's Terry. He's like, oh, yes. So he's like running up the gangplank, all puff, here. And he instantly signed my guarantor. And I still have the passport to this day, 1 week to remain in Australia. So I got in and I had my friend Fern. She and I went together to stay with Terry. And during that week, Trev turned up and luckily his best friend's girlfriend was working for immigration at the time. And so that made everything a whole lot easier. So that was, how I entered Australia. That was on the 6th of the 6th of 76. And like, for me, numbers have a lot. Like whenever I go to a hotel room or anything, I always add up. And if it adds up to 3, 6 or 9, I know it's going to be good. I don't know why, it just is that way. I've always been like that.
Yeah.
So we lived in Perth for a while. I obviously couldn't work, so I was just doing modeling for drawing, for artists, things like that. And then he worked in the bakery, obviously. And then we bought a Morris Major, little old Morris Major, and we drove up to north of Western Australia to a town called Dampier, which is like a port where they take all the iron ore from, the inside of Australia and ship it out all around the world. And he was working for a company called Poon Brothers. So as a baker pastry cook, and they gave him, with the job, was a room and food. But then, of course, what was I going to do? So, and this was in single men's quarters, and this is all Yugoslav men. This whole complex was all little, like what today they have in the back of trucks, big cubicle things. And so there was all these cubicles all together, and that's where these men slept, and then they worked in the daytime in their different jobs. So I had to keep like real quiet. I know this is going to sound really weird, but obviously I couldn't go to the loo because this is men and stuff. And so I had to like wee in the bottle and all that kind of stuff, right? Because it was a bit too dangerous for me to go out. And he'd sneak food into me. And in the daytime, I was working as a washing hair and a hairdresser in this town. So we stayed there for a while and then earned quite a bit of money, actually. And then we thought, oh, well, we better head back to Sydney and meet his parents, right? Meet the parents, right? So off we go, start driving across and I'd never driven a car before, because in Europe, in Italy, I drove motorbikes, as you do, Vespas. I had my Vespa, I drove everywhere. And so off we go, we drive down, and he goes, oh, let's just go there. It'll just take a few hours, and it's like it's taking a day. It's like, well, that's normal in Australia. I realize that now. 150 kilometers is nothing. Like people go 150 for a liter of milk, right, and back. So, but at that time, you don't understand how vast and big this country is. So we get across the Nullarbor, which is like the road that goes from Western Australia to Eastern Australia. It's all in the desert. It had just been tarred, and there's a 90-mile straight. And Trev said, okay, now you can learn to drive. So well, there's no corners. Fair enough. Okay, cool. I can deal with this.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got behind the wheel, but no sooner did I do that, the kangaroo crashed into the car.
Oh, wow.
Because what kangaroos in the evening time, they hang by the side of the road to keep for the warmth. and they get blinded by the lights, and so they jump around all over the place and then move straight into the car. Luckily, there was no damage to the car, but it kind of jolted me a bit. It's like, oh shit. But anyway, we got to Trev's parents' place, and with all respect to his parents, and they were a little bit bamboozled because, I mean, I hate to say this, but Australians are quite racist, and I wasn't quite that welcomed, and I'm trying to be polite, and they were nice. His dad was really nice, but his mom was like real standoffish. Many years later, she apologized extremely because she realized her mistake. But, for a number of years, she wasn't. And so we thought, now this is so we went up to live in Brisbane. And so we needed some money. So I thought, oh shit, I've got to, I was working in restaurants, but not cooking. I was as a waitress. And I thought, oh, I'll be a secretary. It's not me, secretary. That's the last thing would ever happen. But I went to secretarial school, which I hated. And we lived in this town. Oh yeah, and then we lived in a tent in the suburb called Redcliffe, and there's a big pineapple factory. And so I always thought that pineapples grew on trees coming from Europe. I never thought about where pineapple. I'm thinking, yeah, apples grow on trees. Logical? No, not at all. So I got this job putting pineapples in cans in this massive factory. And I quickly learned that pineapples did not grow on trees at all. And we lived in this little 4-man tent in a caravan park next to this biker and his girlfriend for a number of months. It was a little tent. And it was actually kind of cool. Like, we were young, we could do all that kind of stuff. And there was no housework. It was just a tent. And off we did. We earned quite a lot of money. We saved quite a lot of money. And then we finally had enough money to move into an apartment. We had a Morris Minor at this point. And the only problem was that it was a really hilly suburb. And so to get to our house, we used to have to reverse the car up the hill to get home, because it was the Morris Minor didn't have the strength in the engine to get up the hill.
Oh, yeah, because you reversed. Yeah. Okay.
So we reversed up the hill.
Yeah.
And we decided, no, we couldn't live there. It's too expensive, ridiculous. So we moved to another place. We worked there for a bit, and then we had enough money to go back to Europe. At this point, I was kind of keen to go back to Europe and show, continue his journey and show him where I came from. So off we go. We went back to, so we went back to Europe, and we traveled around Europe and met my parents. And we got on a boat. First job we got on a boat, a charter yacht, going around the Mediterranean. And the guy who owned the boat was a sculptor from New York in the 60s, who must have done really well. And he had this beautiful yacht that was the last cheap ship or boat that left Dundee.
Right.
And it was like a pirate ship. It had like a poop deck at the back.
Yeah.
And he was a tough task. I mean, he taught us everything about sailing. Even though at that point I was only like the cleaner on the boat, and Trev was the deckhand. And then we took these charter guests on, and he was so strict, this dude. But it was good because he taught us all kinds of things, and we had all kinds of adventures, and that was a good experience, because living on a boat, you learn a lot about life. You have to deal with a lot of different situations that you don't normally have to do on land.
Yeah.
So we earned money, and we thought, oh, okay, let's go back to India. So off we go, right? We go back to India and travel around India. We went to Goa. We went to all over India. We went to Sri Lanka, which was then Ceylon. And we traveled we didn't go back to Kathmandu, but what we did do was we decided to go back to Europe, but on a hippie trail. what's called a hippie trail, right? So in those days, they used to go from London to Delhi, and I don't know, they used to do all the hippies and stuff. So, but this was in 1976, right? And so we started traveling. We got to Pakistan, and we met Dan, and we often wonder. He was from southern North America, and he had a really thick accent, and he was a cool dude, and he traveled with us for quite a long time, and we ended up going all over Pakistan, and then we met this Pakistani guy who loved alcohol. And so when you got to India and these countries, they'd give you a little ticket so you could buy alcohol, because Indians weren't allowed to drink alcohol. And so he managed to squirm our 3 tickets off us in exchange for a stay in his house in Kashmir. This was potentially what was supposed to happen. And so we went, yeah, cool, that sounds good, and meet me at this place and this time, and we'll meet over a meal, and obviously we'd only been eating, rice and dal at this point. And so we were quite excited about this. We thought, oh, this is going to be really good. So we met him, and, we pull up in this dining room with a big table full of all fruits and vegetables and all amazing curries, and we just all went, oh, wow, this looks amazing. And the guy pulls me over to the side and goes, yeah, but you can't touch this food until I have sex with you.
Oh, went, crikey.
No, this is not going to happen.
This seems to be a bit of a theme.
Oh, so I went, no, this is not going to happen, right? You try asking my boyfriend, right? See what he says. And of course he went, no way. So of course we weren't allowed to eat the food. We never got to see this great house in Kashmir and smoke the wonderful hash and all that, which was fine, right? So we went, oh, well, we carried on, right? So we went, I'm just going to grab a drink. So we headed on to Afghanistan. Because at this time, when we first got into Afghanistan, in Kabul, there was like football fields full of Russian tanks.
Yeah.
In those days, there was no internet or anything like that. Like it wasn't like you could just pick up a newspaper and read something. We didn't know. We were just travelers. And so we went, oh, that's a bit weird. I wonder why that is. Anyway, so the 3 of us pulled up into this hotel and stayed there for a bit, and then it started to get a little bit dodgy, like their kind of army starting to tramp around the place, and then one day they go to us, you have to leave tomorrow. So we go, oh, okay. So we had some hash with us, and we didn't want to take it with us. So Trev, being the pastry cook, he made these like what do they call, the balls, the balls of, they got a name, they're like hard balls. And so he made, and he used, dried fruit and all the wonderful, dried fruits I have in Afghanistan, and 2 of them, 2 each, right? And we said to Dan, we had to go, we had 1 each, right? And then we said to Dan, look, just don't eat the other one when we're not there. Whatever you do, do not eat the other one. So we had to go and do a bit of shopping before we left. And then the next day, literally, the army comes and they bash at the door with their guns and break the door open, and you have to go. And so Dan, he'd eaten the other ball, and we already couldn't wake him up that night before. And we couldn't wait. It's like, Dan, wake up, Dan, wake up, Dan, wake up. And he just wouldn't wake up. He was alive, but he just couldn't. We just comatose.
Yeah.
And they literally dragged us out and put us into this bus. And it was a bus to go down to Herat, because we were trying to get to Iran. And so the bus trip, during the bus trip, we went through the Khyber Pass, and I was sitting by the window. There was an Afghani guy sitting next to me, and then Trev was sitting some other place on the bus. And luckily, I had my head not against the window, And all of a sudden, like the bus kind of crashes into the side of the road, right where my window was. So my whole side of the bus was all ripped open. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, oh shit. There's this rock, like literally like looking at me. And,
Right.
and everyone like jumped out, and everyone's a bit freaked out. I'm a bit freaked out. Everyone's freaked out. So we had to get on another bus, and we got on this other bus. And in the meantime, when you're in Afghanistan, they love guns. I mean, they just love.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you could buy them anywhere. They try to sell us guns and everything like that. And so then this bus was like really, really full because there was all of us in the bus plus the other people who were in the bus. And I'm sitting there, and this guy's like sitting on the floor, and he's trying to get to my money bag, which was on my waist. So he's trying to, I could feel his hand up my leg. I'd kick him, right? And I wasn't about to go to sleep. And I just, every time he touched, kicked him harder every time. And in the morning, after a little bit, he disappeared. And the people next to me, the two English couple, had everything stolen. So they fell asleep, had everything stolen. And but we were dropped off in, I don't know, it must have been about 11 o'clock at night or something like that. And we didn't know that there was a curfew at that time. And so there was nobody on the street except for us two and these two other army dudes on the other side of the street. And they kind of looked at us and went, like that. And I went, oh, just piss off. I'm going to fix my money belt, just leave me alone. And they didn't like that at all. So they like literally ran across the road, put a gun to my head. And then at that point, Trevor went like, oh, shit. And he, like, in the cartoons where you see someone's like, take someone and the legs go up in the air and they're running. Those, and you see whizzes like that. Well, that was virtually us, right? And I don't know, and I'm still to this day, I still don't know how the hell we found the hotel or even knew, because it wasn't internet or anything. I have no, plus it was a curfew. But anyway, we got into a hotel, managed to stay there a couple of days, and then we got ourselves together to go into Iran. So again, this was when Ayatollah Khomeini they had all that, killing the Shah of Iran.
Yeah.
And so we get into Iran, and all the movie houses were all gunned down. Anything to do with America was blown up. There's army everywhere. But they loved Trev because he looked Iranian, because he's got dark hair, and they always used to think he was Iranian. They go ooh like that to him, like they're doing Iran, and he's like, no, I'm not Iranian, dude. I'm just Australian. But that was good because they. But I remember that first night, and we heard all this commotion on the street, and I looked out the window, and this bullet just goes. Must have missed me by about.
Yeah, because you literally walked out of the frying pan into the fire, haven't you? Really?
Pretty much, yeah. And so that was like, oh shit, no, close the window, close the blind, close everything, jump into bed, put the pillow over my head. And so we got through Iran, and towards the end of Iran, get to one of the last stops. And for some reason, I took it upon myself to clean my ear. I don't know why. And consequently, I ended up with a horrendous ear infection, which came like that, like literally took 2 hours. And I was just like, I was sitting in the bus, and I said, Trevor, oh, my ear's hurting. Next minute, I was like, fever was high. And luckily there was, on the bus, there was a doctor, and he was able to give me very, very basic antibiotics. And we stopped in a town called Erzurum. I'll never forget this town. And it was winter, it was snowing, it was December. And Trevor had never seen snow. And so we got out of the bus, and I remember saying to Trevor, when you walk, don't walk normally, walk, because it was like ice on the road, just walk, with your foot up and down, don't like slide. And of course he didn't listen, because men never do. And he went straight onto his ass. So he quickly learned to to walk, how to walk on ice. And I was basically stuck in this hotel, or this, I remember it was like really old, stone and dark room for 6 weeks. And Trev was really worried about me. Like I was really, really sick. And I didn't eat, I didn't do anything. And he was really panicking. So he's running around the town trying to find, and it just happened to be that there was an American doctor in town who was a nasal and nose and throat specialist. And he was giving lectures at some university there in Turkey. This luck, right? Or, well, you know, fate, whatever. And he gave him a bunch of antibiotics that I took. And eventually I got well. And first thing I did was, and I never to this day forget, the fried eggs. It was the first thing I'd eaten for weeks. And they were like really crispy on the edge. And I still love eggs like that, like crispy at the edge. And then I went to have a Turkish bath. And it's, you know, Turkish women are big, you know, big women. And I must have looked like a skeleton because they took one look at me and went like that. And they just took me in and like treated me and washed me down and just looked after me amazingly and really nurtured me. And so eventually I got better and we were able to make our way back to Europe. But when before we were leaving Iran, one guy came up to us, a journalist, and tried to give us a couple of film canisters, you know, and we were tempted, but I said, nah, anything could happen. If we take these canisters of film, we could be in big trouble. This could be, this could be a trap, you know. So he said, oh, there'd be money at the other end, you know, and that. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. No. In retrospect, I'm glad we didn't.
No.
So, yeah, eventually we made it back to, and at that point, my parents had a house in Italy in a place called Portercole, which is in Tuscany by the sea. And so we went and had Christmas there and, you know, had a bit of fun, met my old friends again, the ones that were alive and, you know, weren't dabbling in horrible stuff and all that. And we got another job on another yacht. No, we went to live. No, that's when so then I thought, okay, I need to have a career. This is ridiculous. I travel a lot. This is when the cooking thing came in, right? And so I didn't want to do a whole 4-year apprenticeship. So my mum said, look, I'll tell you what, I'll pay for you to go to Cordon Bleu School of Cooking in London, because that was a year's course, right? So, okay, cool, yep, I'll do that, right? She'd do anything to get me, you know, sorted. So we went to live in London, and we lived in Golders Green, and Trev worked at Brent Cross for a pastry company, called, I can't remember now, Lindy's, and I think I don't know if it's still around now, but they were quite big. They had shops all over London, or that part of London anyway. And I worked in the day, in the weekends and that, in one of their other shops, and he worked at Brent Cross at Lindy's, making bread and stuff. And I went to the Cordon Bleu School of Cooking, and I spent the whole year doing that. And then when we left with my little diploma, went back to Portercole, had Christmas, and then we got a job on another boat. I mean, this was a 65-foot fiberglass ketch. It was the biggest fiberglass ketch at that time. There weren't as big, fiberglass boats weren't that big at the time. And we got a job, he crewing and me cooking. So we had to spend about 2 months in Nice, and had to cook for my employer on this little 2-gas burner, obviously Cordon Bleu meals. And clearly they must have loved my cooking, and I got employed. So we got on this boat, and off we go across the Atlantic, and took us 6 weeks. And of course, you know, when you cross the Atlantic, yeah, there was 6 people crewing, and I had to have every single meal sorted before I even went to the supermarket to buy food. And then I had to pack it accordingly so that, I couldn't just sit there and go, oh, tonight I think we might have this. I had to know everything in advance, right? Because, you can't like pull open a freezer and let all the cold out, just to go find a pack of peas down at the bottom. So I had to, we walked out of that super, and Rene was the son of the owner of the boat who'd done several crossings. Thank goodness he was there. And he helped me shop. And I think we came out of that supermarket with, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 trolleys full, like overflowing with food. Because I had to cater for not only 3 meals, but because when you're on a boat, you have to be, 2 people have to be awake all day. So they were on 2 hours off, 4 hours on, 2 hours off, 4 hours, except for me. I was the only one who could sleep at night normally. And I remember I used to wake up in the morning and I said, oh, I'll never forget this. And my coffee, because we were at it tacking, I'd be drinking my coffee sideways, and as well as that, like it was a gimbal stove. So, so some days if we were tacking in one way, the stove was like, I'd have to reach over, to mix my food, or if it was tacking the other way, it was like pops like that, and I couldn't use the oven because obviously you open the oven and all the food comes flying out onto your feet. And then when it got rough, I had to get tied into the galley, like so with string, so that I didn't kind of bounce all over the place.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning curve. That and 6 weeks,
Take on World Cookery to a new level.
I tell you what, it was next level. It was next level. It was quite an experience, but it was wonderful training. It was wonderful training again. Being on a boat and being in the middle of the ocean for 6 weeks, no land, nothing, and just dealing with the people on the boat and trying to get along with people on the boat. And they were all really nice. We never had any horrific, storms, thank goodness, or anything like that, which is good. And then when we got to the Caribbean, Trevor and I and Sue stayed on, and Alan, the captain, and then we took on charter guests. So we did the season, I don't know, was this 4 or 5 months or something like that?
Yeah.
Up and down the Caribbean, West Indies, sorry. And that was fantastic, that was a beautiful part of the world. It was hard work. I mean, trying to look after these people who, paying $1,000 a day to be on this boat, and I had to cook that kind of food and that, but they were all really happy with my cooking and their tips weren't that good, and we'd try and pamper them so they'd give us good tips. And then usually the ones that were the most pain in the neck gave us the least tips, but yeah, but it was cool. We learned a lot. And so we got there, but we had to come back to Australia because I was, had a visa I had to get back to. So we come back to Australia and we come back to Australia and live in Sydney. And that's when I started working in restaurants and this, that, and the other. And we decided we didn't want to live in Sydney anymore. This is boring. Sydney's boring. And we want to go and live in the country, right? So we found a little place called Scott's Head.
Sorry,
and
didn't catch that. What was it called?
Scott's Head, which is probably about 5 hours north of Sydney. And we opened up a cake shop called Cosmic Cakes. But in those days, being Australia, and I come in with my accent and this, that, and the other, and the Cosmic Cakes, they thought of drugs right away. And it was a bit of a shock, and one of Trev's specialties is Danish pastries. And so, they'd never heard of it. It's called crescent buns, and it's like crescent buns, like crescent buns. Anyway, so we, next minute, all the other bakeries are making supposed Danish pastries, but they weren't anywhere near as good as our pastries, of course. And we had that bakery, and I got pregnant literally 3 months into it. I said, wake up at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to make meat pie and mix it. yeah, I'm feeling sick. I wonder why I'm feeling sick. This is really strange. Anyway, next minute I found out I was pregnant. So that was a bit of a shock. So we had that bakery for about 3 years, and we left when Celeste was born at home because I never made it to the hospital. She was so keen to get out of me. She just went, "I'm out of here, move," and literally home birth, no choice, nothing.
Yeah, no.
Out. I had a midwife which I'd met to give me a massage, and she said, "Look, ring me when you're about to go to the hospital," because I said, "I don't want any drugs. I just want to have a natural birth." She said, "Ring me." And I told her whenabouts I was going to have this birth. And I remember getting up in the morning, and I walked down to the bakery, and Trev's mum and dad were there. And I spilled all custard tart all over the glass shelf and made a damn mess. And Trev's mum got all upset. She said, "Oh, go back home. Like that. So off I tropped back home. It was only a short walk. And Trev's dad was there. So, "You got to get married. You got to get married." And I'm having like pains here and there, and everything's like, and I couldn't think straight. And I just kind of went, "Oh, for God's sake." Anyway, so Trev got real worried, and he runs up to the house. "Go, you all right? Are you all right?" I said, "No, I've got these weird pains, and they're coming at certain times, and maybe you should try and ring what's her name up, right?" So down he rushes down. We didn't have a telephone in the house at the time. Runs down to the bowling club, and calls up this woman who lived, I don't know, 20 minutes away, half an hour to Maxfield, this other town. And so she just happened to have been walking out, and she was just walking out along the path, and she heard the phone ring in the distance. So she came back, and it was Trev. And she goes, "I'll be there right away." And so it took her, 20 minutes to get there. And by the time she got to me, Celeste's head was poking out. And so she literally put the gloves on and welcomed Celeste into the world. And, and Trev's mother refused to close the cake shop. And my mum, who's a bit of an alcoholic, was drinking vodka like there was no tomorrow. And I was hungry. I'd given birth, but I was hungry, but nobody was able to cook me food. So I went and made food, right, for myself and the midwife. And yeah, I know it's a bit strange, but it was cool. And Celeste was kind of crying in the room, and I'll never forget. And she goes, "No, let her cry. She'll learn to be independent." And I thought, okay, fine, right. So I didn't cook the big. It was just a sandwich I made, but so that was that was a bit of an experience. And then we decided, I was sick. It was just the town was too small, and I'm a chef. I'm not a baker, and I didn't like bakeries. Boring. They're all white. There's flour everywhere, and besides, they weren't very imaginative cakes because they're not very imaginative cake eaters, Australians.
No.
Especially at that time. And I remember one little thing I do remember about every New Year's. I used to have this little joke. I used to joke on the customers, and we'd go in at really early in the morning on New Year's Day, but for all intents and purposes. And people would start coming in at 6 a.m, and they go, "Oh, is that bread fresh?" And I go, "No, that's last year's bread." And they, "Oh no."
Yeah, exactly.
Just to pull their leg a bit.
Yeah.
So
I would have done that as well.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a bit of fun sometimes. They didn't get it.
No, a lot of people don't get jokes at all.
No, and then everything had to have apple in it, right? And it was apple pie, apple custard. Oh, I'm not sure which one. And I'm thinking, they're all the bloody same. So I'd always pick like the one that I'd want to get rid of, the cake. I said, "Oh, you got to eat that. That's the best." And so they'd always eat it. They'd come back for more. So obviously they must have enjoyed the food. Anyway, and so then we sold the bakery. And then we went up to where we are living now, which is in near a town called Byron Bay. And it's on the Northern Rivers in the state of New South Wales, on the far north coast of New South Wales, and bordering with Queensland. So we're like about 2 hours south of Brisbane and 8 hours north of Sydney. And we bought this bit of land, 10 acres. And like it had only cows on it. And Celeste was 2.5, and the grass was so tall that when she ran in the grass, you couldn't see her. You could just see the grass kind of rustling in the, where she was running. So it was just a blank slate. And we sit there, I was like, oh, okay, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to build a house. What are we going to build a house for? So we thought about it. We didn't have much money. We thought, let's build a rock house, right? So I never thought, I mean, we weren't builders at all. Trev had done a little bit of building work when he was in Sydney, here and there, thankfully, and when we were living up in the Gold Coast as well. Had done a bit of building here and there. So he knew a little bit, and we bought a book, How to Build a House, right? So, and literally, right? So we had this bit of land, and we thought, okay, rock house. We never actually thought about, like how long it would take. It was a dream, and this is the thing, is that sometimes when you dream something, your intention, your dreams do come true. And this is what this rock house has taught me. Took us 27 years to build. And like, I dug all the footings because Trev was working from 6 a.m. until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was working as a chef at night. So I had all day, and Celeste was at school, or primary school at the time. And so I dug all the footings for the house, a 600 by 800. And it was because it was a rock house. So and it was supposed to be a second 2-story house. So it's a massive footings, right? And I dug them all. I had a pitchfork and a crowbar, right? And it's all in like in clay soil. So it was quite hard to
that's amazing.
To do this, right? And so anyway, I built it. I mean, I was strong. I was young. I had full of energies, and we had dreams. And so I built it, and got this rock thing. And I remember we got right to the very, 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 very end, and we were about to go to a party or something, a barbecue or something, and it had just finished the whole footings, and had done the metal work, to put the concrete in, and the concrete truck was supposed to come the next day, and I remember Trev going, Jules, you need to go and get rid of that little inch just there. And we got into a bit of a fight because I said, nah, that's not going to make any difference. 1 inch, what's 1 inch going to do? He goes, okay, you'll see one day, right? I went, yeah, whatever, right? So anyway, finally, when he got the frames up, and I mean, still to this day, you can see that 1 inch right up to the roof. Because if the footings aren't right, then it's going to carry it right through to the top. So when you look at that particular side of the house, you can actually see this little movement, where it goes up. It goes, look, see, Jules, this is what happens when you don't do things. It's Virgo, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you don't do things perfectly? So we built this rock house, and it took 27 years to build. And then our son was born, Elliot. So we got the rocks off our land with our ride on, and we used a carb on it, and we'd like spend maybe 3 or 4 months collecting all the rocks. And I was going to university at the time, studying art as well. So I was going to art school. I always wanted to go to art school, right? So I found an art school up at Lismore, and I went to it. And I got a degree in sculpture in the end. And so I suppose I could say that the rock house is one of the biggest sculptures I ever made, essentially. So we got all the rocks, and we collected them. It'll take three or 4 months to collect them. And because we're looking after kids, and we're, working, and we're building a rock house. And then we looked at the rocks maybe for another 3 or 4 months. And then one day we'd get up and go, let's start the wall. And we'd always just we would not finish until we'd done one full wall, right? One complete, so we could stand back and look at it, because then that would make the dream more realistic. You know what I mean? Like if we finished halfway, then it wouldn't give us, the determination to do the next wall and the next wall and the next wall, right? So this took 27 years, to get this whole house finished, and so the kids grew up, and we finished our house, and I took up surfing. I love bodyboarding, and keeps me fit, and Trev surfing, and we built rock walls, and the kids grew up, the dogs died, and then we thought, oh, okay, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we're travelers, let's go traveling. So we rented the house and we spent about 9 months in China. We traveled around China and we rented the house, and then we came back and we got a little cottage that we live in. And then we went another time to South America and a few different countries like that. And then we come back here now, and now we haven't gone anywhere. We got stuck in Melbourne last year in lockdown and we couldn't move. So that's kind of the short end of a long story.
That's amazing. I mean, there's lots of little threads and things there that are interesting, where you're sort of on the edge of anarchy in a lot of points, aren't you? And it's sort of like you just sort of scrape through with things. I think maybe that's what boarding school taught me.
I
think probably there's a lot of stuff early on where you're like sort of discovering things about yourself, which I think is you're saying about your parents.
Yeah.
You're discovering this sort of unknown thing somehow in yourself.
Yeah.
And you're finding all these skills that you just sort of, I mean, to become a chef is one thing.
Yeah, I was quite a good chef. Yeah, I used to work in some pretty good top quality restaurants.
Well, it's amazing. It's amazing because I know you do art. And,
yeah, I love art. I still do art. I can't help myself.
Yeah, and the other, we're listening to your story. The sort of the way that you made some mention about, well, obviously about dreams. Having a dream.
Yeah,
things sort of manifest. And I think that's true. And it's only when you sort of look back, isn't it, that you sort of realize how these things work. Because if somebody actually told you early on, okay, you might not believe it, but people don't tell you that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think you'd live your life differently.
Yes. And I think too that it's the unexpected that is the thing that makes the character. And
that's a very good point. It is.
Like we've been together, Trevor and I have been together for 47 years. Especially when we were building the rock wall and we were going through a lot of shit, like hard stuff. We could have easily have separated, but I don't know. I think we just had this dream, and we just followed that thread, that you just don't give up. You just can't give up. That's just a cop out to give up, like so many people do that. Oh, it gets too hard. I'll go that way.
Yeah.
And the only thing about getting old, that I've to, I'm, well into my older age now. You actually have the opportunity, as you said earlier, to look back.
Yeah.
And this is what, like, when young people, we say, to them, look, you just got to believe in something, and you just got to trust yourself, and you just got to work through it. Like, and there will be hard times and there will be difficult times. It's not ever going to be just easy all the way.
No, that's right.
Life wouldn't be worth living if it was like that.
No, that's right. And I think that's a really important point, that we've got to a point in society where people don't do the struggle anymore.
Yeah,
because everything's a little bit too sudden, instant. You can just do that thing now.
Absolutely.
Obviously, from the point of view of being doing what I do, you sort of realise, well, you're only good because you put a lot of time in. There's a lot of sweat.
Exactly.
And the other thing that I think was important in your story is the fact that there was no money.
No money.
You know what I mean? You had to get by on your wits, and that's another thing, that this is something that keeps coming up when I interview musicians who are, some of them are contemporary with me. That we started off and we had nothing. There was no information. You couldn't find anything, you had to work it out for yourself. You didn't have the fancy guitar, or fancy instrument. You just had to get what there was, which is often pretty rubbish, and make do.
Yeah.
And I think there is something lost in not having to do things that way.
Absolutely.
You don't build that muscle that is the inspired creative muscle.
Yeah, exactly. And like through struggle, you're always crawling out, and that gives you strength.
Yeah.
Gives you that muscle, to keep going. And like when you have a vision of something, that's all you need sometimes in life, is a vision or a dream, and as you said, nowadays people just want everything instantly. Oh yeah, I'll have that instantly. I'll have that. Oh yeah, that'll. And then they get all unhappy when they don't get it instantly, commit suicide, whatever, right? But and we were lucky in our days, I suppose. You and I, that in those days there wasn't like the Instagram, blah, where everybody could just get nothing really. People,
well, this is the thing. I think it's. What is it that people actually want? Perhaps that's not the right word. What is it that people actually feel that they need, but they find it in what they think they want? Meaning, when people go and buy a lot of stuff, it's probably not the thing that they're buying that they actually need. There's something else that they feel that's missing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, your story of traveling, there was the story that's actually, Sonia McNally.
Yes.
Her story is similar in the traveling thing.
Absolutely. And her bit with when she was talking about when she was breastfeeding, when she was in art school, because I was giggling when I heard that, because I had exactly the same experience, having a kid, breastfeeding, trying to, and then except for in my case, we had no electricity. So I was like painting, in with a gas lamp. And I used to always remember like I think, oh, well, Rembrandt did that. So I'm sure if he did it, I can do it.
Yeah, but not breastfeeding at the same time.
And breastfeeding, well, no, he wasn't, but I was. Because Elliot decided to be born in the first semester that I was at uni. Which was, so that's why I came to sculpture, because I started doing oil painting, and then I thought, oil paint's probably not that good. So I thought, I'll do sculpture, and I actually adore sculpture. Sculpture's, I'm actually really good at sculpture, and really, but yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing how much talent is in a person.
Yeah, if you string yourself out enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally
push the envelope.
Yeah.
To a point. People say to us, "Oh, you're so lucky,"
Oh yeah. It's a bit like people saying, "Oh, you're so talented."
Yeah,
this is the other one that gets me. It's like, well, if you put in as much work as
exactly, exactly, but it's not taught anymore, or whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, I know with my kids it is, because obviously with your kids probably too. But modern people now, they just I don't know. It's all very confusing.
I think they're being sold short.
Basically. Yeah. I think everything's just too quick. Everything's just like, oh yeah, here, oh yeah, there. Oh, I'll have that there. Oh, and I can have that. And I can just throw that away and have a new one.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that. And
No.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Well, thanks, Julia. That was amazing. That was.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing. I mean, because I like, because obviously there's quite a mix of people that I interview, as you know.
Yeah. And they're all amazing. Like when I was listening to all the podcasts, I went, oh my God, his interview's amazing. People have nothing compared to these people.
Yeah, but the point is, people's stories.
Feel humbled.
And it's like, I always remember people talking about Jimi Hendrix doing this, and I've met a couple of people who knew Jimmy, the point was that he could go and watch a guitarist in a band who weren't special, and the guitarist wasn't particularly special, but he'd spot something that the guy was doing that he would go like, that's good. And he would go away and he'd practice it.
Yeah.
And the point is that everybody's story is that special.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't matter if somebody is a big name or not.
Yeah.
It's not that. And what I'm looking at is that element in somebody's story that is of value, to myself. Actually, I do a lot of this. I do because I learn from listening to people, and it's then by actually bringing those stories out that other people who are, want to learn. That's how you learn. It's just by listening to somebody's story.
Yeah. And as I do listening to your other podcasts, so what goes around comes around.
Absolutely. That's good. Well, thanks ever so much. It was brilliant.
Thank you very much, Vic.
It's great. And all the best. What's the weather like there at the moment? Because obviously we're supposedly going into summer here, but you would never know at the moment. But what's it like?
Well, we live in a subtropical area.
So you're pretty much off of the rainy season, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, people start. Yeah, no, it's a dry season now, so it's winter. But like the days would be 20 degrees. Like today was perfect. Like there wasn't any wind. The ocean was sparkling. It's the best.
Come on, you're making me jealous. Come on. That's great.
Whereas if I was in Melbourne, it would be a completely different story. It'd be horrible and cold and miserable. So it's a big country, this one.
Yeah, no, it's massive.
It's got, all kinds of things. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for.
That's all right. Brilliant stuff.
I had great fun. Thank you, Vic.
That's all right. That was good.
Catch up some other day.
See you soon. Bye.
Much love. Bye.
Thanks to Julia. Links to Julia's sort of Facebook pages and stuff like that in the show notes, and also details of what we're doing for Blues Camp and all the Patreon stuff. So until next time, see you then.